as we head towards what should be an interesting non-conference slate. This is, for a lot of teams, their final non-conference game before we head into a lot of conference play a week from now.
What week is it now? Is this?
This is technically week 3.
But
well, you had the week 0.
So you don't count 0 going in or coming out. Okay.
No. Week 0 never counts. It was just something that happened, and 3 teams.
Do you have anything to do with that 0 thing?
No. I think it's mathematically unsound, frankly. But
that's why I was asking.
I'm not sure where to go with it. I feel like we would be lone voices in the woods if we were to protest.
Week 0.
Yeah, week 0. Yeah. I think week 0 going forward might become a bigger and bigger thing. But
they might want to give it a number. I mean, at some point, like 1.
If 2/3 of the league plays on week 0, does it then become week 1? Anyway, that's a discussion.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Let's get into this week's big story, or today's big story, which is Saturday's schedule. Only Illinois is off as a virtue of their week 0 game. Anyway, we got 2 early games on the network, Indiana and Northwestern in action. Wisconsin tries to bounce back 2:30 against New Mexico State. We have Iowa in primetime against Nevada. 5 Big Ten teams face Power 5 opponents. Nebraska and Oklahoma's the marquee battle. We're going to talk about that one with Joel Klatt in a bit. Purdue battles improved Syracuse. Minnesota takes on struggling Colorado. Elsewhere, Michigan State heads to Washington, and Penn State going to Auburn. Let's start there, Jerry. This is not a great Auburn team, I don't think, by any stretch. But it's a really tough atmosphere, as you know firsthand from having coached there. What intrigues you about this matchup from Penn State's point of view?
Yeah, this is the second time Penn State's had to do this, right? Going to Purdue was no box of chocolates either. So if Penn State comes out of this with a win, they came out of Purdue with a win, I mean, it'll serve them well down the road. What intrigues me the most, I think it's going to be a lot like the Purdue game. You know, Mike Harris is the offensive coordinator. We've talked about him a lot because he and I have some history. They rushed for only 98 yards against Purdue, and that was enough. Why? Because they kept the run game in. So you go to Jordan-Hare Stadium. If you don't have a run game and you're throwing it too much, and the defense and the defensive line of Auburn's good, they're getting some sacks, the crowd just will smother you. The way you keep a crowd out of it is you have to mix the run game in. The way you keep the defense a little bit on their heels is to make sure that they're defending the run almost every first down. Not every down, obviously, if situation football takes over defending run or pass, but on 1st and 10, he's going to have to be somewhat balanced, even if it's 1st and 10, 2nd and 8. It'll be 1st and 10, 2nd and 4 some. But Mike Harris has got to keep the run game in at a place like Auburn. Their defensive line's good. They've been running some decide play, which will really help the offensive line.
Do you think the run game right now for Penn State is going to be less about, like, kind of your focus and your concern? Is it less about the backs now than it is about the line? I mean, this is about the line, right?
It's about the line, and it's about the plays. The plays aren't all that much different. I went back and looked. I went into watching the Ohio game against Penn State. I went into it saying they're running a lot more decide play than they did last year. Not so. They're running about the same amount, but their backfield is so much better. They have depth in that tailback room, in that running back room, so that helps. And then the scheme itself helps the offensive line. Anytime you run an option play, you're always going to help an offensive line because you're taking away the responsibility of blocking one of the people on the line of scrimmage most of the time.
An O-line that hasn't been great in pass protection to this point. They've given up 6 sacks, which is the second most in the Big Ten. Again, that is going to be the area that we focus on with this team, and I think we'll go a long way towards determining how good they are. Like, we know how good Sean Clifford is. We know the backs are better. They've got good receivers.
If it becomes a pass rush drill, it's a problem. When I say that, I mean that the defense is no longer defending the run. It's like a 7-on-7 drill, and you've got problems, especially at a away stadium.
A lot of good targets to throw to as well. They had 17 players catch a pass against Ohio, which is the most for any Big Ten team this century. Let's keep it in the East. Ohio State facing Toledo. What have you learned about the Buckeyes to this point?
Yeah, let's keep it in the East and let's keep it on defense. Okay, Jim Knowles, highly acclaimed defensive coordinator, very good coach. what makes him tick. And after watching a couple games, I think I have a handle on it, and I think I have a handle about his uniqueness. He wants to pressure you more on 1st and 10 than most coaches. Most coaches are going to call pretty much a standard defense. They may move the front, they may mix up the coverage, but they're not going to pressure you, meaning they're not going to designate one defender to come and maybe not worry about run or worry about pass. He does that with the linebackers. He did this at Oklahoma State. So if you could imagine, line up in 1st and 10, and on the snap, perhaps instead of someone reading the offense, they just come. They just take a gap. So he's trying to get you in 2nd and long. And think about the athletes at Ohio State. If they get an offense in 2nd and long, I mean, it significantly swings in favor of the defense. So I think that's the method to his madness, as I can tell studying tape. He's unusual in that he's almost, a little bit like Jim Leonard, he's almost calling plays on defense. In other words, he's sending a linebacker regardless of ball flow, regardless of run or pass. And if they're successful at it and they can hold up in it against the best teams, then it's going to work. I will say this, Arkansas State challenged their gap integrity more than Notre Dame did, because Notre Dame doesn't have a run game. Arkansas State, I mean, you had to be in the right gaps, and it was successful. So now as this defense is on tape more and more, and as they start playing the better teams, they'll start game planning for pressure on 1st and 10. And for me, it's a great X and O study to see how it develops as the season goes on.
So one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot as you guys described that defense when we went to camp, and we got some sort of a sense for it, and then as we've gone along here in these first 2 weeks, is that when you talk about pressure, I mean, one of the things you're looking to do is get a team in 2nd and long. The other thing you might be looking to do is force turnovers. And our great researcher, Harold Shelton, brought up on our call this morning as we were preparing for Tailgate, they have yet to force a turnover. They're one of only 8 teams in the country that hasn't, and you would think that would go hand in hand with this kind of defense. Are you surprised? I mean, do you see that as just kind of dumb, bad luck that they haven't forced a turnover to this point, or is that less of the premise than I assumed it would be?
Yeah, I was surprised to hear Harold say that. I was surprised at the stat, I guess. No, I don't think there's any correlation. Let's just wait and see what happens. Let's let it play out. I don't see it, because I agree with you. You would think disruption in the backfield would be one of the ways you would cause a fumble. In the back end, obviously, it's interception. So I'm not sure. Let's let it play out. Don't know the answer to that.
All right. Well, time will tell, perhaps. What about Michigan? It's been a cakewalk of a schedule. I just don't think there's any way to sugarcoat it. We've mentioned it a couple times. It bears repeating. It's the first time in 78 years they haven't either played a Power 5 team or Notre Dame in the non-conference. That being said, I know you have been really impressed with them. So what can you see against lesser opponents that leads you to say, I think this team is really good?
Well, you can see their athleticism, right? I mean, they're a really talented team. You can see that they're well coached on both sides of the ball, because they're pretty sound. Everybody gives up plays. Everybody has a bad play in offense, but they're really put together in a sound way. I think they're playing with great enthusiasm. I think on offense they have the ability to be balanced, which they were balanced the first game, not so much the second game. And now J.J. McCarthy enters the scene, and I think he's an extraordinary talent. So I think they have everything right now. I think right now they're playing the best in the conference, but they haven't played very good opponents. And that can really swing it significantly. You look at Ohio State, who would be the other team that you'd consider the best team in the conference. The Notre Dame game, although Notre Dame has not started well, obviously they lost to Marshall, they have really good athletes. So Ohio State has played a really good, talented team. Michigan hasn't, but Reva, I got to tell you, they are impressive in every way. Offense, defense, kick game. And again, I think the enthusiasm, we saw the confidence in that team at camp. Right. I mean, that's something that we get to see that no one else gets to see. So they're really a confident team, a well-coached team. I'm just dying to see them against a good opponent.
It won't happen this week.
No.
UConn does not fit that category, but it's interesting to look at the next couple games after that. I mean, you've got Maryland, who is really going to be a good gauge, particularly for their defense.
Absolutely.
Just how good is this defense?
Right.
And then the next week's Iowa.
Yeah.
And say what you will about Iowa, but you'll find out a lot about your offense when you go up against that defense.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah. I mean, that's what we have to wait for. Right. I mean, we haven't seen it yet, but
we're fixing to get some answers.
We're fixing to get to say, absolutely.
Not necessarily fixing to get them within the next 48 hours. But It is time for our big stats, and what a start to his Michigan State career for UNLV transfer Jacoby Windmon, the first player in conference history to win the Player of the Week honors in his first 2 games with the school. And you can see why. He is leading the nation in forced fumbles, sacks, and tackles for loss. Jacoby Windmon joins us now. He is today's big interview. And Jacoby, not only are you the first player ever to win Player of the Week honors in your first 2 games at a school in the Big Ten, you're the first Spartan ever to win Defensive Player of the Week in the Big Ten at any time in his career in consecutive weeks, and you do it in your first 2 games there. Are you surprised at all by the level of success that you've had to this point?
I mean, for the most part, I was always pretty confident in my game, and, I put the work in. So, hard work pays off eventually, but there's always more work to do. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, the key word there is eventually, right? I mean, you kind of feel like, hey, man, I'm going to sweat it out. I'm going to grind here, and I'm going to figure things out at this different level. And yet it has come so quickly. Was there a moment where you've kind of realized, hey, man, I fit here and I can make a huge impact here right away?
I'll probably say on my visit, I got a chance to sit down with the coaching staff and, some of the players here. And then as I got to talk to the guys more, it just became like a no-brainer for me. Coach Tuck, he's a great guy. He does a great job with all of us. And the players here, the brotherhood, it just was very brought in. So I seen a great opportunity for me in my future. And then after that, that was the only choice to do is Michigan State.
So it has worked out incredibly well. It has to have been a whirlwind these last couple of weeks, right? I mean, again, with all due respect to UNLV, and you had a really great year there last year, you're off the radar a little in the viewpoint of most college football fans. And now all of a sudden, everyone is talking about you and your performance. What has that been like? I mean, to really have this spotlight for the first time in your career?
It's been great so far, but the main thing I'm focused on is just being consistent in my performance. So that's something I'm just looking forward to as the season progresses and goes on. And I'm just enjoying it as it goes, and I just know it's just a lot more work to do, and I can't wait to do it.
You were a linebacker at UNLV. You've moved into kind of a rush end position at Michigan State. Take us through that move. Kind of how did that come about?
It all started when I first came here, part of the deal of coming here was me being like a 3rd down package type guy to come off the edge and rush the passer. But as camp and spring ball went on, guys began to get banged up. So Coach Tucker, he sat down with me and we talked about it. He was like, we might need me to play a little DN, and I was all for it. And like 2 weeks before the first game, it was a change that happened, and then I was just ready for it. And everything else went from there. It's been good so far, and I'm just excited to grow at this position and learn more.
One of the things that's really fascinating about the way that Coach Tucker structured his staff this year is that he hired a pass rush specialist in Brandon Jordan. How does that work? Because he works with lots of different position groups. So give us a sense of kind of what working with Coach Jordan is like.
Well, first and foremost, Coach Jordan, he was one of my high school coaches, so
Yes.
It was always good just to be reunited with him and continue to get to work with him and watch each other grow as men. But the process of just his pass rush specialist ability is very rare, because we get a chance to have individual periods when he actually, sit there and teach us, the movements of a pass rusher and the steps and how you got to make everything look the same. So it's an advantage for us, and it's something that we take a lot of pride in, and I'm very grateful to have him here.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit, because I'm sure people were surprised to hear this if they don't know the story. But he was a volunteer assistant at your high school, and now really in a coincidence, I mean, you were already committed to Michigan State when Coach Tucker hired him. So it wasn't as if you followed him to Michigan State or anything like that. But give us some insight into that relationship. I mean, take us back to 14-year-old Jacoby Windmon and the first time that you guys crossed paths with Coach Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, it all started when I was a freshman, man. I was a very versatile guy. I was able to play both sides of the ball. My dreams was to be a quarterback. looked up to Jameis Winston. You know, I liked his game. I admired it. But as time went on, you know, it was another quarterback, and it used to be a lot of times with Coach BT would just, you know, be playing with me about come and get some work as a DN, and I'll take it as a joke. But one day I decided to take it serious and just, you know, get some work with him and, you know, just try to see what I could do. And then that became like a all-the-time thing. I just meet at the park with him sometime and just get some work as a DN. And then before you know it, my junior year, I was actually playing defensive end. And then I just kind of translated it all from there. And we just continue to build and grow with each other from my freshman year up until now. And the process of me coming to Michigan State, I knew this was the place to be, and then just so happened a day later I get the call from him saying that he might be coming. So that was a bonus for me. It was something that had me very happy. I was excited about because I knew the type of person and the abilities that he could offer here at Michigan State, and it just was exciting, man. I can't wait to get to work with him and work more with him as the time goes on.
Yeah, it is an incredible story. It's one of those small world stories. You were the 2,124th ranked player in your class. You mentioned you started your career as a quarterback, and you were a really versatile player for your high school in New Orleans. But why do you think you flew under the radar to the degree that you did?
I believe probably just the amount of positions I played. Like I'm probably sure that people didn't know what position I was most dominant at, because it was a lot of times I was playing offense, I was playing quarterback at times, receiver, I was playing a little tight end. So I would rarely play defense, but the times I did play defense, you know, I made an effort to make the play and, you know, strain for the whole 6 seconds. So I believe that was probably one of the reasons why I flew so low under the radar.
You mentioned how sold you were when you talked to Coach Tucker on your recruiting visit. And this is kind of his MO. I mean, he did a great job with transfers last year. Kenneth Walker kind of most famously, but I mean, the whole team was filled with transfers who made an impact last season in that incredible run for Michigan State. How important was that in your decision when you try to figure out where to go, the fact that this is a place that had had a lot of success with transfers?
It was very important just to see the amount of success Coach Tuck and the guys here have with the transfer portal. So that was also a no-brainer once I seen, you know, the type of path that Coach Tucker paid for Kenneth Walker. You know, he's a great guy, great player, and he came in here, worked, put his head down, and I believe that was something I could do. So it was very inspiring to see what he could do and knowing that you could be the next guy to do it. So, you know, it was great.
It seems to me that this is the new era of college football, and this is an issue not just for Michigan State, but for a lot of places where players are transferring in and out. But how do you build a culture when it's not like, hey, we all came in together as freshmen and, you know, we redshirted and then we played a little bit on special teams and kind of worked our way up? I mean, this is a different model. You have guys coming in at varying times in their career. They may know each other, they may not know each other. How do you build a culture in a program like that?
I think it all just starts with the process, man. You know, Coach Tuck is big on that this is a process-driven program, and, you know, the older guys, you know, they already brought in coming from where they come from, so it just got to get the younger guys to buy in as well, and I believe that's something that we've been doing a great job of since we've been here, since I've been here and the other transfers been here, just buying in to what Coach Tuck says and trusting the process.
I know you haven't really gotten a sense for Big Ten opponents at this point, but what's the biggest difference for you playing on a Big Ten team versus playing on a Mountain West team?
I'll probably say it's not really a big difference, just more demanding. You know, the guys are they're more passionate about it. Guys, they know, they have a sense of what it takes to win. They know that we could compete at the highest level and be one of the greatest teams, you know, to ever step foot on Michigan State. So that's something that I noticed when I got here, and it's something I was looking for. So I was able to come here and make it happen, and I'm still excited about it. No regrets in my decision.
You're facing a really good offense this week in Washington. They're averaging about 570 yards per game. Give us some insight as you watch them on film. What makes them so good?
I believe what makes them so good, they have a pretty good O-line. You know, the O-line does a great job in their pass protection and blocking schemes, but, you know, just given what we've been watching and learning over the week, I think we'll have a great chance against some guys and just go out there and work and play each 6 seconds plays with full speed, as long as you can for as hard as you can, and let the scoreboard take care of itself. They have a pretty good quarterback. He's not as mobile. He throws the ball very well, but at the same time, he has a lot of time back there. So I feel like this would be a great game for the D-line to get back there and get some sacks, get some pressure on the quarterback, and get him off his spot.
What's the strategy travel-wise in terms of the body clock? That's always an issue for Big Ten teams as they head west.
For as far as sleep, we're on a sleep bank schedule. Try to get to bed an hour earlier than what you usually do. It's going to be a long flight there. It's about 4 hours. So we're going to try to we will take 30-minute naps and stay up for the rest of the flight. And when we get there, we're going to stretch, get some sunlight, and we will go to bed early, about 8 p.m., and go from there.
Jacoby Windmon, the outstanding rush end for Michigan State. Thanks so much for your time. Congratulations on all your success to this point. It has been a lot of fun to watch.
Yes, sir. No problem, man. Thank you.
Back on Big Ten today, and what a start for Purdue's Charlie Jones, or as Gus calls him, Chuck Sizzle. The Iowa transfer leading the Big Ten in receiving yards, receiving TDs, receptions per game, and scoring. He had one career 100-yard receiving game entering the season. He has two in as many weeks. It has been quite a story, not unlike Jacoby Windmon's emergence. Syracuse appears to be significantly improved. That's who Purdue plays this week. They go on the road to play the Orange. This is a team that absolutely manhandled Louisville in the opener. They beat UConn convincingly last week. I know UConn isn't a great team, but still, they look to be better. What can you learn about Purdue, you think, this week that might help us understand where they are?
Yeah, let's look back real quick and then look forward, right? The opening game, big game, blackout against Penn State, emotional game. You probably prepared very emotionally, very intently, big game. They lose it right at the end. Then Indiana State, different preparation, very businesslike. We know we have better players, don't turn the ball over. Take a deep breath after that disappointing loss to a really improved Penn State game. So now this game, looking forward, who is the real Purdue? This is the first time I think we're going to see, after the dust settles, what a team looks like. Now, here's what we want it to look like, right? We want it to look like a team that's continued under Ron English, improving on defense. Remember the difference last year? The difference last year was the defense, not the offense.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, but we want to bring the offense with us, right? The offense isn't going to change. This is a team that wants to win by throwing the ball and making their opponent defend the run. And so that's what we should expect as we see him against a much improved Syracuse on the away game. You talk about culture, the Jacoby. How about this culture with the portal? What do I do at pregame meal? The last coach I worked for, you could yuck it up if you wanted to. I'm guessing Jeff Brom's not a yuck it up kind of guy at pregame meal. And so this is the first time some of these guys are going to be traveling. It's usually a freshman first time he travels or a sophomore. Now we have veteran guys that have to learn how to travel the way Jeff Brom wants to travel. And if I'm an older guy and I think my friend's going to yuck it up and I don't think Jeff's a yucker, I might give him a heads up. Right? I mean, can you see?
I don't think he is a yucker. I don't know if he's ever been referred to as a yucker.
Well, I was in the XFL when he was playing quarterback. I don't ever remember him yucking. So he's a pretty serious guy.
It is interesting to think, you talk about being on the road. Purdue has not played a game in the state of New York since 1941
Really?
at the Polo Grounds against Fordham.
Really?
Yeah. Month before Pearl Harbor. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So I love that in the non-conference. I mean, Auburn's never hosted a Big Ten team. They host one this week. So,
cool.
Some of this stuff
is
really cool. Let's keep it in the West. What about Minnesota? And they also get a game against a Power 5 team. And we've talked about schedules, right? And Michigan has not played a great schedule. Maryland hasn't played a great schedule. Michigan State hasn't played a great schedule. I have to believe that when Minnesota scheduled this game against Colorado, they believed they'd be better than they are. I mean, this very well may be the worst team in Power 5. That being said, I know you've been impressed with Minnesota, so maybe not unlike the question I asked you about Michigan. I don't think we're going to learn a whole lot about Minnesota this week against Colorado, but what have you learned even against inferior foes?
What's changed is they're trying to be more explosive in the pass game. Remember Kirk Chiraka said to us when we were on campus that he spent 1 year at West Virginia as a not advisor, what do they call him in the back?
Analyst.
An analyst.
Yes.
And he had a chance to study the game, kind of like a professor taking a sabbatical, right? And so you can see some of those changes coming in now, or I think I can. He wants to be more explosive in the pass game. Here's what you have to do to defend Minnesota. I think it's an extraordinary offense. You have to defend the option. Right? They're an option team. Right. Then you have to defend a play that looks like the option, but it's not an option. It's a predetermined give it to Mo. Right? Because you can't let the defense dictate that Mo will never carry the ball. Because if you didn't have the direct runs, you could every time the quarter, you could make Tanner Morgan run the ball. And,
right.
And Minnesota doesn't want Tanner to run it. They want Mo to run it. So you have an option attack, you have an option looking attack, and now you have an explosive pass game. Now, they're still not balanced. You know, it's not going to be 50-50, but they are trying to be more explosive in the pass game. So I say all that to say, can they survive with that offense and beat everybody on their schedule, including Colorado, who they're playing Saturday? And I say yes. I say this in its own way is a state-of-the-art offense. Defend the run, defend the option, defend the play action pass, and now we're even under center sometimes. So what's changed is I think Kirk Ciarrocca has said we have to be more explosive in the pass game, and he's tried that. Colorado gave up over 500 yards rushing to Air Force last week. I mean, Air Force is an option, a triple option team. Right. But I don't think they're any more of an option team than Minnesota.
No, this does not feel like a good recipe against Minnesota. I mean, again, I don't think there's much to this game.
Correct.
But if you were to analyze this game, it feels like Colorado is uniquely unprepared to defend Minnesota, right?
It sounds like Colorado has practiced their unpreparedness against the option last week.
Yeah. Air Force absolutely ran them over. And, of course, the Gophers averaging better than 300 yards per game rushing, Colorado giving up about 355. So it's interesting because it was clear against Western Illinois. I mean, Minnesota could have won the game without throwing a single pass, right?
Right.
Could have won it probably by almost as much as they did. But they made a decision to throw the ball. Do you do the same thing against a team of this caliber, or do you just say, you know what, this is still a Power 5 team, and we're just going to run it down their throat?
I think somewhere in the middle, poor Power 5 teams still better than other opponents. They still had to sign some players there. They're just not playing well. They're just not a good team. Doesn't mean they don't have good athletes. So I think if I'm Kirk Ciarrocca, I'm going to start with my option. I'm going to start with my predetermined gives to Mo, and if it looks like I'm going to be able to win the game in hand, then instead of just running it like. And we've seen other coaches do this in recent years. Instead of just running it because I know I can win, you have to work on your explosiveness in the pass game. You're not going to tackle in practice. You're not going to go live in practice. This is a chance to really, that last piece of the puzzle, and if they can be explosive in the pass game, I looked at their schedule. They don't have the same talent as everybody, but they can beat everybody on their schedule with this offensive scheme. And let's not forget Joe Rossi's.
I was just going to say, I mean, the defense is pretty good.
Playing lights out.
They shut out Colorado, of course, last year. They held them to 63 yards, negative 19 yards rushing last year in the win over the Buffs. Fox Sports lead game analyst Joel Klatt joining us now, as he does every Thursday for his weekly visit. Joel, let's start here. You and Gus are headed to Lincoln for Big Noon this week against Oklahoma. Before we look ahead to that game, I want to look back. Scott Frost fired this week. Why do you think it didn't work out? This seemed like not just a home run hire, it seemed like a grand slam hire, and yet here we are just over 4 seasons in, and it's over.
Well, I mean, I think that there's probably too many reasons to count, and they're probably all small. This is death by 1,000 paper cuts. And in large part, that's what happened on the field as well. I think Scott made a few mistakes in his support staff. That was behind the scenes, and what it did to kind of the cohesiveness of the actual coaching staff and the feel of practices and the day-to-day, I don't think it ever quite worked. That and the fact that between injuries and losing one-score games, they could not catch a break. Anytime that he felt like he was making a bold decision, it backfired. Nothing went right. Nothing went right. And it was almost doomed from the start, even though all of us, including myself, thought it was a great hire. You know, listen, when they hired Scott, Rev, I remember telling you this, actually, and not that you didn't know, but I'm saying it on shows like this and with you. is that I thought Scott was such a great hire for Nebraska because of his pedigree. And we see so many times coaches that get hired as young head coaches, and they've really only been on one side of the football. And he had everything. He had played for Bill Walsh and Tom Osborne in college. He had played defense. He had played under, Mike Tomlin and Belichick and like all these different guys. And I just felt like, boy, this is a guy that's going to have a lot of success. And it was oh so close. And then when really the rubber meets the road, he had the wrong team for the wrong schedule in the last 2 years. If he has last year's team for this year's schedule, he's probably successful. And last year, they played really good defense and couldn't get it together on offense. They lose all those one-score games. And part of the problem was that schedule was incredibly difficult. So long answer, I don't think that there's any one thing. It's probably death by 1,000 paper cuts, and I'm sure he's lamenting a lot of decisions that he made over the years right now.
So what's the formula for winning at Nebraska now as opposed to 20 years ago, 30 years ago? I thought Trev did a really good job of basically saying, let's stop talking about the past and stop talking about what we used to do and talk about what we're going to do now. So what should they do to get back, not necessarily to winning national championships or competing for them every year, but to being a really good, respectable, solid Big Ten program that's going to compete to win a division or play in the championship game or be a perennial bowl team?
It's a great question. And I learned a lot this last week. I did the Texas-Alabama game, as you know, and just like talking with Nick Saban, those around Nick Saban, and even talking with Steve Sarkisian, about his time at Alabama and then at Texas. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because although Texas didn't fall to these points, they've been close in the last 10 years. And I think Texas and Nebraska fall into the same category. They're so enamored with getting back to this point that is at some high end of college football. When are we going to be what we used to be? When are we going to be back? They're so consumed, Rev, with the destination. And I feel like they forget about the chase. And Nick Saban said something to me in an answer in my conversation with him last week that really stood out. And I asked him point blank, I said, what do you still love about this? Why are you still doing this? What do you love about coaching college football? And he actually contemplated, and I didn't get a throwaway answer, which I was proud of, by the way. But he contemplated for a moment, and he said, well, I guess the chase is better than the capture. I immediately thought of Texas, and I think Nebraska could be in this as well. And Trev is exactly right. Stop talking about the capture. Stop talking about the destination. They've got 10 rungs on the ladder before they can get to the destination. And so they need to focus on what they need to do to get better in increments. One of the things they need to do is they need to get better at the line of scrimmage. They're falling woefully short right now in developing both sides of the ball at the line of scrimmage. I felt like offensive line last year was a bit of a hit or miss while their defensive line was solid. This year, while their offensive line tends to play decently, their defensive line is a sieve. They've got to get tougher at the line of scrimmage. And you see other teams, by the way, in the same type of recruiting predicament that Nebraska is in. Nebraska is in no worse recruiting predicament than Minnesota or Iowa or Kansas State, or Wisconsin for that matter. They should be able to field a team that goes out there and wins the line of scrimmage, and that's what they need to get back to, okay? It doesn't mean that that's how they used to or anything. That's just what they need to do right now. And then from that standpoint, I think it's developing an identity and a defensive identity and having a defense that can go out there and keep you in ball games. Because when you look at the teams with the same or similar recruiting footprint that Nebraska have, generally all of them win in a similar fashion. Play great defense, run the ball well, don't beat yourself. That's how the Big Ten West has been won since the beginning of time, which was, I guess, 8 years ago. But that's what you have to do, and it's that type of blueprint that they need to put into action.
No doubt. I mean, those are the three programs that have won it: Wisconsin, Northwestern, Iowa. That's essentially the formula for all three of them. Obviously, a little bit of variety within it, but that's basically what all of them try to do. Okay, so this week you're going to be there. They're taking on Oklahoma. Oklahoma's in transition as well. They unexpectedly lost their head coach, Lincoln Riley. Of course, Brent Venables taking over here. They're in much better shape. Clearly, they're the number 6 team in the country. What are you expecting to see in this game?
Well, all the storylines are off the field. But when it comes to on the field, I expect Nebraska to play their best game of the season. I think that they're going to rally around Mickey Joseph. I think that the fan base is going to rally. One thing I know, listen, I played against Nebraska. I've been rooting against Nebraska as a fan of Colorado since I was a little boy, and now covering them. I know one thing about the Cornhusker faithful are going to show up, and they're going to support Mickey Joseph, and they're going to support those players. I fully expect Oklahoma to be shocked at the environment. Because they think like, oh man, this is not a very good team. They lost their head coach. Most places in the country, you'd be hoping to get 50% capacity in a week like this. Nebraska is going to be there. They're going to be there an hour early, holding those balloons. And I think that they're going to give Oklahoma their best effort. I fully expect that. And it wouldn't shock me at all if they get a lead early in this game. From that point on, though, when you actually boil it down, this defense has got to improve. And I think we underestimated for Nebraska the loss of some of those veteran players like JoJo Doman or Ben Stilley or Dismukes, the safety. There were so many good players. Cam Taylor-Britt, a draft pick, that were 4th or 5th or 6th year seniors. They just don't have that experience on the defensive side. They've got to find a way to stop Oklahoma's offense. Because the bottom line is Oklahoma's playing really well. They believe in their new head coach. They've got good team chemistry offensively. With Jeff Lebby as their offensive coordinator, they can be explosive, although not what OU used to be, but they are playing better defense, and I think Nebraska's got their hands full.
I want to dive into some other stuff going on, big picture in college football. And you mentioned you had the Alabama-Texas game last week, which Texas had so many opportunities to win.
Yeah.
As you well know, and certainly that would have been earth-shattering had they done it. As it is, I think it pointed out to us that there isn't that huge a gap right now between Alabama and maybe some of these other teams. What did you learn? Was this more about Alabama? Was it more about Texas? And then when you look at everything that happened in college football last weekend, with Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Wisconsin in our league, you go down the list.
Yeah.
What does all this tell you? Like, has there been a narrowed gap here, or are these just independent games which have nothing to do with one another?
It's interesting. Last Saturday would suggest that there's more parity in college football than we've ever had. And yet we all know when we cover the sport, there's no parity in this sport. So, okay, so let me answer kind of both of those. First of all, I thought it said volumes about both Texas and Alabama. The fact that Alabama had some real questions. They overcame them and won the game against a very talented team, but has some real questions. More specifically on their offensive line, their inability to run the football, and their inability to get open and make plays at the wide receiver position. They did not have a wide receiver go over 40 yards in that game, and the running backs outside of the 81-yard touchdown run from McClellan averaged 2.6 yards per carry. That has to get better. On the Texas side of things, they started five-star players on their offense alone. That's a talented group that I feel like is on the path to getting to where they want to be. They were much better on the line of scrimmage, even with a young offensive line, and certainly what their defensive line did, stopping the run game of Alabama. So moving forward, I think that this gives Alabama some pause. Can they still win it all? Yeah, probably. They're still Alabama. They still have Nick Saban. But it's going to be harder than you think, and you might see Bryce Young with a cape on his back more often than not. And then from Texas, I think Texas could win the Big 12. Now, real quickly on your other sentiment, because I think that this is important now. The Sun Belt East had an amazing day. Marshall, App State, Georgia Southern all win at storied places, by the way, at Texas A&M, at Nebraska, at Notre Dame. And yet, because of the 4-team playoff, Rev, all we're talking about are the teams that they beat. And not the teams that actually won. Think for a moment about the expanded playoff coming at us in 2024 and beyond, and what that would have meant for the Sun Belt East if they had a legitimate path to the playoff. It would have been so much bigger. So Saturday, as good as it was, it still pales in comparison to what we might be looking at in the future when we have a real playoff and an expanded playoff where teams, even in the Sun Belt, have a clearly defined path to the postseason.
I'm with you 100%. We talked about this last week, and it's the genius of going to 12 teams, which is that everyone in the country is going to believe they have a chance at the beginning of the year. And again, even if that is whoever it is, App State, Coastal Carolina, whomever, is going to believe they have a path to the playoff. I want to leave you with this. Finish the sentence. The best team in the Big Ten right now is?
Ooh! Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know. And for the first time in 10 years,
I've never heard you
I can
say
say
that.
it that way. Because for 10 years, Ohio State has run the conference.
Yeah.
And it would have been very easy to say Ohio State. But Michigan's pretty good, Rev.
Yeah, they are.
They're pretty good. And especially with JJ in that offense, I don't know.
All right, we'll check back. I'm going to ask you this question. We'll have several points throughout the year.
There you go. I love it.
I will post this. Always fun. Thanks so much, Joel. Always look forward to it. Have a great call this
Absolutely.
weekend.
My pleasure, bud. Thank you.
Football team, they're trying to bounce back from a loss to Washington State. The offense really fell apart in the second half. They did not score. They turned it over 3 times as they lost for just the second time in their last 48 non-conference home games. They get what figures to be a get-right game, frankly, against New Mexico State. But, Jerry, what concerns you about Wisconsin coming off what's an unexpected loss to Washington State?
Let's start with the good news. I think Graham Mertz has made great improvement. They're giving him things that I think he feels really confident about, and they're doing that by formations. They're helping him in the pass game with formations. And that is connected to the bad news. They've lined up mostly in one back. Sometimes there's a fullback lined up as a wing or 2 tight ends, but basically there's one back in the backfield. When you put one back in the backfield, the play that you run the most is a zone play, whether it's an inside zone or an outside zone. Washington State defended that play. What Wisconsin has historically done when someone has defended their zone play is they go to a gap scheme. Most gap schemes, you need a fullback in the backfield. You need the blocker because the line's going this way and the fullback's going that way. So I think it's going to take them a little bit, and they don't have a little bit, I understand that, but they're trying to help the pass game, and it's, in my opinion, hurt the run game. Now, the offensive line's not playing great either, but I think it's all connected. But how about this? On 1st and 10, they were 35% successful. Now, here's what success is on first down. You gain 4 yards or more. They only did that 35 times. Now think about
35%.
35%.
Yeah.
Now think about Wisconsin. 2nd and long, 3rd and long. That's not like their box of chocolates, right? They're not really good when they get behind the stakes. And you get behind the stakes because you can't run it on first down. So they've got to solve that.
So the one back is to help the pass game?
Because it spreads out the other formation.
Yeah.
Right now there's more receivers. There's 3 wide receivers.
Right. So are you going away from your bread and butter, which is the way that you've won for years, in order to help something that's your offhand? I mean, what's the logic there?
Okay, they've won for years, but not recently, not last year. Okay, for Wisconsin, when was the last time they were in Indy?
I know, it's been 2 years that they missed it.
Well, how many years do you get? I mean, I'm just saying. Yeah, I
hear you.
It's big picture.
I
Now,
hear
you
you.
know, Paul's probably dying 1,000 deaths, right? Because he's no longer calling the plays, right? And Bobby Ingram's calling the plays. And so he's smart in making this change. It's good in my opinion, it's good long-term view instead of short-term view.
Let's get into Indiana a little bit. They also have a new offensive coordinator. Interesting game against Idaho. I mean, right, to fall down 10-0 at the half, and it was a weird game because you had the weather delay and all of that. But, didn't get off to a great start, and didn't really get off to a great start against Illinois either. How important against a Western Kentucky team that can score points in bunches, how important is it to get off to a good start this week? I mean, this is a game you could lose.
It's a game you could lose, and they've put themselves in a position to win both the games, and they've both been drastically different. I mean, the reason they're 2-0 is Tom has made some really significant decisions, right? He takes over the defensive play calling, and then he hires Walt Bell, and while Walt Bell is implementing a new offense with his offensive staff, Tom's in a defensive meeting room. So, you know, what's going on in that other meeting room? Then, against all odds, in my opinion, he beats Illinois. Because I think you were convinced, as well as I was, that first game set Illinois up to beat Indiana. So now the third game, I guess I'm going to say, you know, Tom's like Rocky. I mean, he's going to find a way to win that game. Now, whether he gets off to a fast start or not, I don't know. I mean, he goes in 10-0 against Idaho, right? And then he comes back and beats Idaho. So The reason he's 2-0 is because of what he did in the offseason and the way he made very, very big decisions with himself calling the defenses and with hiring Walt Bell. And I'll say to you, yes, they could lose to Western Kentucky, but I believe because of those decisions, he'll beat Western Kentucky. We can't get into it now, but this Walt Bell offense is fascinating to me. I mean, it is unique, and hopefully we're going to do a part on Urban Analysis some week trying to describe it. It's really unique and really different.
You were talking about the degree to which they spread the field.
The spacing, and it goes back to Baylor in 2014, and I'm researching. It's really interesting.